Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gopinata Radha Gopinata Shri Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadramaya. Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parishara Sutra Sata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Thar Gaur Pamanande Hari Hari Bol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 3, Chapter number 8, titled Manifestation of Brahma from Vishnu. Text number 13. Tasyartha suksma bhinivista dristir. Tasyartha suksma bhinivista dristir. Antargato arto rajasataniyan. Antargato arto rajasataniyan. Gunena kala nugatena vidya. Gunena kala nugatena vidya. Susyam stada vidyatana bidesat. Susyam stada vidyatana bidesat. Tasyata suksma binivista driste. Antargato arto rajasa taniyan. Gunena kala nugatena vidya. Susyam stada vidyatana bidesat. Tasyarta suksma binivista driste. Antargato arto rajasa taniyan. Gunena kala nugatena vidya. Susyam stada vidyatana bidesat. Tasyata suksma binivista driste. Antargato arto rajasa taniyan. Gunena kala nugatena vidya. Susyam stada vidyatana bidesat. Tasyata suksma binivista driste. Antargato arto rajasa taniyan. Gunena kala nugatena vidya. Susyam stada vidyatana bidesa. Word for word translation. Tasya, his. Artha, subject. Suksma, subtle. Abhinivista driste, of one whose attention was fixed. Antagataha, internal. Artaha, purpose. Rajasa, by the mode of passion of mature nature. Taniyan, very subtle. Gunena, by the qualities. Kala anugatena, in due course of time. Vidha, agitated. Susyan, generating. Tada, then. Abhidyata, pierced through. Nabidesat, from the abdomen. Translation by Jaguru Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: the subject matter, the subtle subject matter of creation on which the Lord's attention was fixed, was agitated by the material mode of passion, and thus the subtle form of creation pierced through his abdomen. Vishnu Prabhupada will continue on, text number 14. Sapadmakosa sahaso datistat kalena karma pratibodhanena swarochisatat salilam visalam vidyo tayan arka ivatmayoni. Piercing through the sum total form of the fruitive activity of the living entities, piercing through this sum total of the fruitive activity of the living entities, took the shape of the bud of a lotus flower, generated from the personality of Vishnu, and by his supreme will it illuminated everything, like the sun, and dried up the vast waters of devastation. No purport. Next text number 15. Taloka padmam sa'u eva Vishnu pravi visat sarva guna vabhasam tasmin swayam vedamayo vedata swayam bhuvam yam smavadanti sobhu. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: into that universal lotus flower, Lord Vishnu personally entered as the Supersoul, and when it was thus impregnated with all the modes of mature nature, the personality of Vedic wisdom, whom we call the Self-Born, was generated. Purport: this lotus flower is the universal Virat form, or the gigantic form of the Lord in the mature world. It becomes amalgamated in the personality of Godhead Vishnu in his abdomen at the time of dissolution, and it becomes manifest at the time of creation. This is due to Garbhodakshay Vishnu, who enters into each of the universes. In this form is the sum total of all the fruitive activities of the living entities conditioned by mature nature, and the first of them, namely Brahma, or the controller of the universe, is generated from this lotus flower. The firstborn living being, unlike all the others, has no mature father, and thus he is called self-born, or Swayambhu. He goes to sleep with Narayan at the time of devastation, and when there is another creation, he is born in this way. From this description, we have the conception of three: the gross Virat form, the subtle Hiranyagarbha, and the mature creative force, Brahma. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chaksu Ilmritam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So thank you for coming to Srimad Bhagavatam class today. So we're continuing on our discussion from the 8th chapter of 3rd canto, titled Manifestation of Brahma from Vishnu. And just now we're starting to see the Brahma being born again on the lotus flower from the navel of Garbhodakshay Vishnu. So, and today is also the auspicious day of Bhadra Purnima. It is said in the Bhagavatam itself that on this auspicious day of Bhadra Purnima, if one gives Srimad Bhagavatam, keeping it on a golden throne, to another person, then for that person, the spiritual world is guaranteed. He's guaranteed a place in Goloka Vrindavan. And why is it mentioned on golden throne? Because Bhagavatam is not just a book, it's actually Krishna himself. Just like we worship Sri Sri Radha Gopinath on a beautiful throne, golden throne, in the same way, Srimad Bhagavatam is non-different from Krishna. That's why it is said on Bhadra Purnima, you place Srimad Bhagavatam on a golden throne and you gift it to someone. So, yeah, Srimad Bhagavatam is non-different from Krishna, and we see in Sanatana Goswami's praise to Srimad Bhagavatam, he also mentions this, Paramananda Pataya, Prema Varshi Aksharayate, Sarvada Sarva Sevyaya, Shri Krishnaya Namostu Me. So in the last line he's saying, Shri Krishna Namostu Me. I'll offer my obeisances to Srimad Bhagavatam because Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna himself. And the first line he's saying, Paramananda Pataya, that if we simply study, do patan or pataya, study Srimad Bhagavatam, read Srimad Bhagavatam, hear Srimad Bhagavatam, we will get the topmost bliss, the topmost joy. And Prema Varshi Aksharayate. Every single syllable, every single word of Srimad Bhagavatam is significant. Every single word of Srimad Bhagavatam is saturated with Krishna Prema. In one lecture in Melbourne, Prabhupada is mentioning in the class in Melbourne to his devotees that actually Srimad Bhagavatam is so deep, it's so vast that every single word of Srimad Bhagavatam has so much meaning, and you can just, for a whole month, Prabhupada says in this lecture, for a whole month you can just study one verse, because every word has a certain meaning, and you can look on a particular verse in different angles, and different acharyas, they give different purports, and outlooks to that particular verse. So Prabhupada was telling in this lecture in Melbourne that actually Bhagavatam is so deep that it will take us at least 1 month just to cover one verse. And then Prabhupada tells his disciples. So then you calculate, there is 18,000 verses in Srimad Bhagavatam, and if you study one verse every month, how long will it take you to cover the entire 18,000 verses? And then someone calculates and tells Prabhupada, 15,000 years. That's how long it will take to complete the whole Bhagavatam, studying it, every verse for a month. So Prabhupada said, this is how deep and this is how great and unlimitedly deep is Srimad Bhagavatam. And this whole Bhagavatam class that we're doing every day, this was all established by Prabhupada. Prabhupada, he established during his time that in every single ISKCON temple, daily we would read one particular verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. Before the class we would recite the verse out loud, and then someone would discuss the Bhagavatam, lead the discussion. And it was Prabhupada's desire that every day during Bhagavatam class, Prabhupada instructed that we should analyze the verses of Bhagavatam from different angles of vision. In this way, different devotees, they come and they share their realizations from different perspectives, different angles of vision. So in this way, Bhagavatam is ever fresh. The same verse, if we analyze in different angles of vision, as Prabhupada wants us to do, we'll get different meanings, different realizations. And as I was mentioning before, it's said in that verse, later on in Bhagavatam, that on this auspicious day of Bhadra Purnima, if one puts Srimad Bhagavatam on a golden throne and gifts it, one is guaranteed a place in Goloka Vrindavan. And golden throne because Bhagavatam is non-different from Krishna, so naturally it's befitting to place Srimad Bhagavatam on a golden throne. There's one pastime with Srila Prabhupada. I think this also took place in Australia only. In relation to this, Prabhupada was visiting a particular temple, and one of the leaders of that temple, he wanted to gift Srila Prabhupada something. So he had this idea that what he'll do, Prabhupada loves Bhagavatam so much, so he thought, I will make a nice little cloth, a very fancy cloth, on which Prabhupada could place his Bhagavatam. So instead of the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada can put the nice fancy cloth on the ground and then place his Bhagavatam on the ground, and this way Prabhupada can have a nice cloth for his Bhagavatam. So this devotee, he went to the Maharajis in the temple and he asked them, that I have this nice idea of a gift, so you please, get the nicest, fanciest cloth you have, do some very nice design and make a very nice cloth on which Prabhupada could place his Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada would really like it, you please do something nice. So all the Maharajis, they started stitching and they made a very nice, beautiful cloth for Prabhupada to put his Bhagavatam on. So this devotee, he got like a nice box and like a gift pack, and in that he put this cloth for Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavatam. Along with that, he also brought some mangoes also for Prabhupada from the market, and he put those mangoes in the box also. And then he came, and Prabhupada was in the room with other disciples, and this devotee, in his mind, he was already, imagining how he will give the gift to Prabhupada, how pleased Srila Prabhupada will be, how in front of all the other disciples, Prabhupada will single him out and glorify him. That just look, this devotee is so nice, he has given me such a nice, wonderful gift, like this. He's already planning in his mind how he's going to get such nice, reciprocation from Srila Prabhupada, how Srila Prabhupada will be so pleased. Just like we hear in Akura, that's like the nature of the mind. Before we go on to do something, in our mind we start imagining, how it will happen. Like Akura, as he's going to Vrindavan, in his mind is already calculating. When I go to Vrindavan, I'll roll on the dust like this. Krishna will come, he'll offer his obeisances, he'll grab my hand, saying, Uncle, please come, and he'll do this to me, he'll do that to me. So in the same way, this devotee, he was planning like this. So then he comes up to Prabhupada, and there's other disciples, and he says, Prabhupada, I have a gift for you. And Prabhupada says, what is it? And then this devotee, he takes out the cloth, and this devotee tells Prabhupada that, Prabhupada, I bought this beautiful cloth for your Bhagavatam. Instead of putting your Bhagavatam on the floor, you can place this cloth on the floor and then put your Bhagavatam on top of this nice cloth. And then Prabhupada immediately cuts him out and he says, I don't place my Bhagavatam on the floor. And then this devotee tries to explain, no, I'm not saying you place the Bhagavatam on the floor. I'm trying to say that you put it on this nice cloth. You don't have to put it on the floor, but on this cloth you can. And Prabhupada again cuts him out and says, I don't place my Bhagavatam on the floor. And this devotee, he thought Prabhupada didn't understand him, and he tried to explain to Prabhupada in explain himself, what he wanted to do, what was his mood. And Prabhupada, every time, he just kept cutting him up and told him the same thing again and again, that I don't put my Bhagavatam on the floor. And then this devotee was completely flustered, and then all the other disciples in the room were laughing, and this devotee was just like, just smashed, and he was feeling down. And then, but he still had the mangoes in the box. So then he said, Prabhupada, I also have some mangoes for you. And then Prabhupada's demeanor immediately changed. Then Prabhupada had a very big smile on his face, and he said, oh, very nice mango. This is the king of all the fruits. This is a real gift, like that Prabhupada said. And then finally Prabhupada, he accepted the mangoes. So again, in this nice Leela Prabhupada, we see how Bhagavatam is non-different from Krishna, so it needs to be worshipped. And yeah, we can't just have a cloth and put Bhagavatam on the floor. That's also disrespecting the Bhagavatam, as Prabhupada is showing in this nice particular Leela. So Prabhupada, we were hearing in Srila Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja Day, we were discussing how Prabhupada, right from his, throughout his whole life, he was taking full shelter of Srimad Bhagavatam. Like we heard Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he was once having a conversation with one of Srila Prabhupada's sons, and I think it was Vrindavan Chandra. He was explaining to Tamal Krishna Maharaj that during Prabhupada's Grahastha time, Grahastha life, every day Srila Prabhupada used to study Srimad Bhagavatam for 4 hours every day. So Prabhupada was still working, doing his pharmaceutical business, still maintaining his children, doing his family duties. But on top of doing all of his family duties, working, every day, Prabhupada's son mentions that every day Prabhupada used to study Srimad Bhagavatam for 4 hours every day, which is, quite a lot. So Prabhupada, during his family life, was taking full shelter of Srimad Bhagavatam, and then we see later on Prabhupada translating Srimad Bhagavatam, and when he's going to the West, what does he carry? The only thing he has in his possession is just 40 rupees and a whole trunk, a whole suitcase just full of first canto of Bhagavatam. That was his only possessions. That's the only thing he took to the West. That's the only thing he took to America. So again, we see Srila Prabhupada's faith in this book, Srimad Bhagavatam. He's not just seeing it as just some ordinary book. He is seeing it as non-different from Krishna himself. And Prabhupada has that faith in Bhagavatam, just like one of Prabhupada's god brothers, they were glorifying Srila Prabhupada, that actually Prabhupada is the ultimate or the best servant of the holy name. Why? Because Prabhupada had so much faith in the holy name that due to that strong faith of Prabhupada in the holy name, he was able to make so many countless persons all around the world take shelter of the holy name and make them chant Hare Krishna. And how did this happen? Because of Srila Prabhupada's intense, strong faith in the holy name. And this god brother Srila Prabhupada, he explains that his other god brothers who previously went to England, again to propagate the mission, they didn't have that strong faith in the holy name, and that's why they weren't able to convert others or inspire others to take shelter of the holy name. So the same thing we can say with Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada had so much faith in the potency of Srimad Bhagavatam that that's the only thing he took to the West. And he had so much faith that if people just take to Srimad Bhagavatam, if people just hear Srimad Bhagavatam, take shelter of Srimad Bhagavatam, immediately their hearts will be transformed. That's why in the prayers Prabhupada offers in Jaladutta, he quotes these famous verses, right, from Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 2. Shinvata swakata Krishna, nasta prayasya abhadreshu, tada rajastamo bhava. So these beautiful verses glorifying Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada recites, remembering, contemplating, being deeply absorbed in the message and the power and the potency of Srimad Bhagavatam. So we also need to have that same faith and conviction that yes, this Srimad Bhagavatam is actually the only solution, the only remedy to all the problems of this material world. Another time Srila Prabhupada said that actually just this one book, Srimad Bhagavatam, is enough. We don't have to read anything else. If you just simply read this one book, Bhagavatam, everything is there. You won't miss out on anything. In this one book, everything, whatever you're interested in, you'll find in here actually. And we can think about it, contemplate on it, just like if you go to a library or a bookstore, there'll be many different sections, right? In a bookstore, there'll be the fiction section where there'll be so many novels. There'll be a non-fiction section. In that section, there'll be some section about world travel or science, cosmology, some history section, philosophy section, and so on and so forth. So there'll be many different sections. And actually, All these different sections of books we'll find in different libraries or bookstores. You can find all of those things in this book, Srimad Bhagavatam. So someone might have, a hankering to really learn about history. And what a better history book is there than that of Srimad Bhagavatam. Ordinary history books, they just give the history of just a few hundred or 1,000 years max. Where Srimad Bhagavatam gives the history that goes back, millions and billions and trillions of years ago. Not only that, ordinary history books, they'll just give you a brief overview of what happened this time, this time during the history of the earth. But Srimad Bhagavatam goes into so much detail when it's narrating its history. It's giving detailed word-for-word conversations that took place between personalities, millions and billions of years ago. Not only does it give word-for-word conversation, but it also gives what was going on in persons' minds. Just like in 5th canto we hear about Bharat Maharaj. In that particular chapter, Sukadeva Goswami, he recites what was Bharat Maharaj thinking in his mind when he was getting sidetracked from his bhakti, when he was becoming so attached to his deer, to this pet deer. So in this way, Bhagavatam is, outdoing all other history books which is out there. It's dating back to billions and billions of years ago, and it's giving so much detail into the history, not just of planet Earth, but the history of the whole universe. Then, let's say fiction. In fiction, people have, different interests like adventure or romance, horror, and all these things we'll find in Srimad Bhagavatam. Just like horror, we have the pastime of Lord Nrsimhadev. My Guru Maharaj says that the whole Leela of Lord Nrsimhadev, Hiranyakashipu, is like the ultimate horror movie. People, they go to the cinemas or they read horror novels, to get a certain type of rasa. And that we can also find in Srimad Bhagavatam. And also, there's so many different battles, right, and wars that take place between demigods, demons, like Dhruva Maharaj and the Yakshas. And if you read the descriptions of these great battles and fights, it's actually very gory. It's like you get that horror, a ghastly kind of rasa out of it. Just like in the battle between the demigods and demons in 8th canto, it's given this battle between the demigods and the demons was so intense, so fierce, that as they were fighting on planet Earth or Bhumandala, due to the intense fighting, the dust from the ground got raised all the way to the higher planetary systems. So just like if you have two bulls fighting in the ground, then naturally due to the intense fighting of the two bulls, dust will raise up. But how much it will raise? It will raise maybe up to the ceiling of this room. But the fight between the demigods was so intense that the dust raised by the intense fighting went all the way up past the sky into the clouds to the higher planetary systems. Then it's mentioned, just like in engineering, in construction, due to the great different groundwork, dust will be raised up. And to reduce the dust pollution, what they'll do, they spray water. And when they spray water, that will make the dust come back down to the ground, and there won't be dust pollution in the environment. So in the same way, although due to the intense fighting of the demigods and demons, so much dust was raised into the air. In the fighting, what was happening was different demigods and demons, their bodies were being pierced by different weapons, and when their bodies were being pierced by different weapons, blood was spraying out from their bodies. And as I explained, this blood got sprayed so high into the sky that this blood made the dust come back down to the ground. Just like in construction, the dust gets raised to the sky, and the workers, they spray water to make the dust come back down. So in this battle, there was so much blood coming out, splurting out from these demons and demigods, that the blood was going all the way up to the sky into the clouds. And due to the weight of the blood, all the dust which was being raised up, the dust, due to the weight of the blood, it started coming down back to the ground. So if you try and, in your mind picture that scene, how gory and how, gruesome, blood just splurting everywhere, going up into the sky, into the heavens, into the clouds, it's a very gory, nasty scene. So in this way, another gory scene I can think of is the Jada Bharat incident. When the dacoits, they were about to sacrifice Jada Bharat, Kali, she immediately comes out of a deity form, and then with a chopper she starts, it's again very gory scene where she's starting to chop off the heads of all the dacoits. So like this, those who have that kind of rasa or want to enjoy that kind of, horror or ghastly kind of rasa, they can find that in Srimad Bhagavatam. And those who are into romance, they can read, the Krishna's pastimes with the gopis. And unlike other, mundane romantic novels that we find in libraries or bookstores, which will just simply increase our lust and increase our bondage to this material world, Bhagavatam says when we read Krishna's pastimes with the gopis, the opposite effect will happen. Our lusty desires in the heart will be destroyed and will become more pure-hearted. So adventure, that's throughout the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. Obviously philosophy, the whole Bhagavatam is full of such wonderful philosophy. Cosmology, we hear so many times in news, people spending countries and nations investing, not just millions but billions of dollars to explore outer space, to explore how the universe works, sending satellites, sending spaceships, wasting so much billions and billions of dollars of money of taxpayers, of just ordinary citizens, just to explore the space. But, someone who's intelligent, they could just take shelter of Srimad Bhagavatam, just 5th canto, everything is there. How all the planetary systems are situated, how everything is working, what sorts of living entities are living on other planetary system, all of this is just mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam. So like this, if we analyze it, we can see that actually Prabhupada's words are so true, that actually we don't need any other book. Whatever we want, whatever our mind is hankering for, whatever our intelligence is hankering for, whatever questions and doubts we have, we'll find answers for all of that. We'll find, the satisfaction of all the hankerings or desires or whatever rasas and, things we have in our heart. All of those things can be satisfied just by reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Understanding this, we can go out and preach Srimad Bhagavatam with more confidence and, without holding anything back. Understanding that Bhagavatam has everything. Bhagavatam has philosophy, it has cosmology, it has history, it has romance, it has horror, it has adventure. Anyone out there, no matter what background they're coming from, what consciousness they have, what desires they have, what likes and dislikes they have, Bhagavatam can satisfy them. So generally a product, you'll have, like in marketing, they'll ask, in the planning stage, okay, who is our audience? They'll ask, right? So we need to have a target audience. Who are we targeting? Okay, this novel or this movie, we're going to target the young people. So we're going to design it to attract the younger class. Or this product, we're going to target older generation of people who are sick and have a lot of, bodily problems. So this medicine will be for the older generation. So any product in marketing, they always ask you to first analyze and state your audience. Who is your audience? But this book, Srimad Bhagavatam, as we just discussed now, there is no limitation to the audience of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is meant for anyone and everyone. No matter who the person is, what their background is, what their likes is, what their dislikes is, they will find something in Srimad Bhagavatam that will satisfy their heart. They will find something in Srimad Bhagavatam that will fulfill their desires, fulfill their hankerings, their consciousness, their intelligence. In this way, Srimad Bhagavatam is meant for anyone and everyone. So when we're going out there doing outreach, presenting Srimad Bhagavatam, distributing Srimad Bhagavatam, we need to have no fear in presenting Srimad Bhagavatam. Understanding that actually Bhagavatam has everything. Actually, no matter who I'm talking to, whoever it is that I'm talking to, they will find something in Srimad Bhagavatam that will satisfy them. So Bhagavatam is meant for everyone. And Prabhupada had that faith. That's why when Prabhupada is going to America, out of all the things he could have bought, that's the only thing he carried. He just carried a trunk full of first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada, he explains in one lecture that to his disciples that this first canto of Bhagavatam is actually very, very important. It's actually very, very special. Why? Prabhupada explains that he wrote this first canto in Vrindavan, in the famous Radha Damodar temple. And Prabhupada writes that during this time when he was writing first canto in the Radha Damodar temple, it was very intense, and Prabhupada writes that he didn't know whether in the future he would translate the other parts of Bhagavatam, what would happen. So just like Krishnaraj Kaviraj Goswami, he didn't know whether he would live to finish the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita. So what he did at the start of Madhya Lila, he gives a whole summary of the later pastimes of Mahaprabhu. Of the second 24 years of Mahaprabhu's life, he summarized the entire 24 years in just 1-2 chapters. Because he wasn't sure whether he will continue or live long enough to finish the whole CC. So in the same way, Prabhupada writes or explains to his disciple that when he was in Vrindavan translating first canto, he wasn't sure whether he will have the time or the opportunity to translate, write purports for the rest of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Prabhupada explains to his disciple, therefore, the entire philosophy of Krishna consciousness, starting right from the basics to the higher levels of Krishna consciousness, like love of Godhead and separation. Prabhupada explains the entire teachings of Mahaprabhu from the basics to the most highly elevated topics of Krishna consciousness that Mahaprabhu taught, that his disciples, his followers taught. He packed the entire teachings into first canto Bhagavatam. He packed the entire teachings in his purports of first canto. So in this way, Prabhupada, he explains to his disciples that this first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is very special, very important. Whatever you need to know, our entire philosophy of Krishna consciousness, it's all summarized, it's all there in my purports in first canto. Prabhupada says he put whatever we need to know in first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So if we can't distribute the entire Bhagavatam set, at least we can distribute the first canto. Because as Srila Prabhupada says, in his purports to first canto, he has put everything. Whatever, even the highly elevated topics, the basic philosophy, for any devotee in any stage of life, Prabhupada has put everything, packed everything into his purports of first canto. So if not the entire Bhagavatam set, at least we can distribute the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. That would also be a very glorious endeavor. One quote, remembering Prabhupada, he used to say that whenever I get news of a particular volume of my book being distributed, I feel like I've conquered an empire. And this is very significant. Every time we distribute books, that's actually what we're doing, where it's like conquering an entire empire. Because as we know, the whole material world is overcome by sense gratifications, overcome by, just this whole demoniac atheistic propaganda. So the more books we distribute, it's more like, we're establishing the empire of Krishna consciousness, we're establishing the empire of Krishna, of the Goswamis, of Mahaprabhu. So in this way, Prabhupada was explaining or highlighting this point, that first canto is very special. That's why Srila Prabhupada, he took that first canto to the West with him, having full faith. If I just simply distribute this first canto Bhagavatam, people's consciousness will be changed. And we're hearing in the seminar by Kamsari Prabhu about the ISKCON's early days, how in the early days Prabhupada used to do everything. He was like a one-man show. And Prabhupada used to distribute his own books in New York, actually. He used to distribute the trunk full of first canto of Bhagavatam Prabhupada brought to the West. Prabhupada himself used to distribute. Not only that, like we were hearing one pastime of some lawyer or something, someone who was friendly with the devotees at that time. Prabhupada, not only did he distribute his first canto of Bhagavatam to this person, but he also made him into a life member of ISKCON, also made him sign up to give monthly donations to the temple. So just like in our temple we have Gopinath Seva, in which we sign up new devotees to support the temple, support the worship of Radha Gopinath by giving Lakshmi like $1 a day, $2 a day, $5 a day. So in this way, Prabhupada was the original starter of Gopinath Seva, or the original fundraiser also. So Prabhupada would do everything. He would do fundraising, sign up people for helping the temple by donating every month, and he would also sell his own Bhagavatam to them. And also at the same time, he was the head chef. He used to cook for all the devotees. And he was also in charge of the cleaning department. At the end, when everyone would take prasad and go, Prabhupada would clean up. He was also in charge of serving the prasad. Like in our temple, there's so many services. We have different devotees in charge of different departments. For Sankirtan book distribution, we have one devotee in charge. For Gopinath Seva, fundraising, we have one devotee in charge. Cooking, we have Prem Sagar Prabhu in charge of the kitchen. For serving the prasad, we have another devotee in charge. Okay, Prabhu, you're in charge of serving the prasad. Make sure everyone gets enough prasad. And for cleaning, again, we have another department. Prabhu, you're in charge of cleaning. Make sure at the end of the festival, you clean up everything nicely for next day Mangalati. But Prabhupada at the start, in ISKCON's earlier days, he was doing everything. He was the head chef. He was in charge of Gopinath Seva or fundraising. He used to inspire people to donate to the temple, to sign up for monthly donations. He was the first book distributor, the first Sankirtan leader. He himself used to sell his own books. He himself used to clean, and he himself used to serve all the prasad. So yeah, it's really amazing what all Prabhupada did in the early days. We're hearing in the seminar. And one time Prabhupada, he told his disciples that actually to start a temple, all you need is just one sincere person. Just one sincere person is enough to start a temple. You don't need anything else. If you just have one devotee who's very sincere, he himself will do everything. He himself will cook, he himself will clean, he himself will distribute books, he himself will give the class, he himself will cultivate the new bhaktas, and he himself can start a whole temple or start a whole zone just by himself. And Prabhupada displayed that just by himself. He's going to a completely foreign land with a foreign language, and it's just him alone. But because of Prabhupada's sincerity, because of Prabhupada's faith in the holy name, faith in Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada single-handedly was able to do so much. Single-handedly, because of Prabhupada's intense desire, his sincerity, he was ready and willing to do everything. He was ready, even at his advanced age of 70 years, Prabhupada was willing to cook, clean, serve, distribute books, sign up people for fundraising. These aren't easy services. To go out and ask people to please donate, help, to distribute books. All of these are actually very difficult services. For anyone who's done book distribution, anyone who's done fundraising, they know that actually it's a very difficult service. But Prabhupada, all these difficult services, he was single-handedly doing. So taking inspiration from Srila Prabhupada, we also should cultivate that same level of sincerity, and we also should have that same mood of surrender, to be willing to do anything and everything, whatever is needed to push forward Mahaprabhu's movement. I was reading yesterday one purport of Prabhupada in the Brahma Vimohan Leela, and Prabhupada is explaining in the Brahma Vimohan pastime how is it one should surrender oneself at the lotus feet of Krishna without having any reservations, without holding anything back. Prabhupada writes that during the whole pastime where Brahma is getting bewildered by Krishna's potency, firstly he steals all the calves and the cowherd boys, and then he takes them to his abode and he puts them in a cave, and then just for a moment he puts them, then he turns back, because Prabhupada explains that Brahma knows that sometimes when you do something and in your heart you know that you did something wrong, and the super soul will be tickling, and then so Brahma was having that feeling. He did it just like that, but then the super soul in his heart was tickling, and Prabhupada writes that Brahma knew that he was playing with fire. So immediately, that guilty consciousness comes, and then immediately he turns back to see what has happened. And then when he turns back, he sees on planet Earth, a whole year has passed, but even though a whole year has passed, the cowherd boys and calves, they're still there playing with Krishna, just as they were playing a year ago. So then Brahma gets bewildered, and Prabhupada writes that using his own, mature intelligence, Brahma is trying to figure it out, how is this possible? And Brahma is thinking, Prabhupada is writing that in his mind, Brahma is maturely calculating, how this is possible. Brahma is saying that in his mind he's thinking that maybe these cowherd boys and calves which are on planet Earth are actually just an illusion, they're just fake, and the real ones are back there. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe these are the real ones and the ones I took are fake. Or, like this, he's calculating different options. Or maybe what has happened is when I leave Brahma Loka and when I come to planet Earth, what Krishna does, he steals the cowherd boys and calves from there, then he puts them in planet Earth. And when I leave planet Earth and go back to Brahma Loka, then again he transfers these cowherd boys back to Brahma Loka, where I am. So in this way, Krishna is switching the cowherd boys back and forth between Brahma Loka and planet Earth. So like this, Prabhupada writes that in his mind he's trying to calculate different possibilities. What is happening? Is it this possibility or that? Which one is it? And then in this way, as he's calculating, he's just getting more and more bewildered. Then finally what happens in front of Brahma's eyes, he sees that all these cowherd boys and calves, they immediately start taking four-handed Vishnu forms. Not only that, Bhagavatam explains, then Brahma sees all the living entities in the universe, from the lowest to the highest, from the ants, the bugs, the birds and the beasts, all the way to the demigods. All living entities in the entire universe, they take up different forms, and they start worshipping all these beautiful Vishnu forms. And it's also given that Kala personified, Karma personified, all of these personalities that we're hearing about in Bhagavatam now, they all take a form and they start worshipping these Vishnu forms. And in this way, Brahma's bewilderment just gets more and more and more. And then finally Krishna, he thinks, okay, he's had enough. And then Krishna, using his Yogamaya potency, he then makes everything come back to normal. And Prabhupada writes that it's significant that Bhagavatam mentions Yogamaya, because Brahma is a pure devotee of the Lord, He was no ordinary person. For pure devotees of Lord, it's Yogamaya that's acting. It's not Mahamaya. Just like in Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna is a Nitya Siddha devotee of the Lord. So Arjuna's being put into illusion was by Krishna's will. It was due to the influence of Yogamaya. So then finally when everything is, the whole scene is back to normal, then Brahma realizes his mistake, and then he comes and he offers his obeisances to Krishna. And in that purport, Prabhupada explains about how one should surrender unto Supreme Lord. Prabhupada is writing that generally the demigods, they never touch the ground. They never touch planet Earth. They'll always hover above. If you read in Bhagavatam, descriptions are given that the demigods, they will never touch the ground. They always hover above the ground. Because for them it's like, it's like a dirty place, planet Earth, and you never put your feet, on planet Earth. Because they're from the higher planetary system, so that's like the general thing they follow. But here, Prabhupada is writing, firstly, number one, Brahma, he didn't hesitate to not only touch the ground, but he's putting his whole body, laying flat on the ground to offer his obeisance to Krishna. He's not thinking, I am a great demigod from Brahma Loka, I am the head of the universe, I am the creator, I shouldn't touch this dirty ground, or why should I offer my obeisances? No, he's letting go of that etiquette or that thing the demigods follow, and he's touching the ground and he's offering his obeisances. Then secondly, Prabhupada's writing, not only is Brahma offering his obeisances and touching the ground, but secondly, Prabhupada is saying that Brahma is not only touching the ground with one of his heads, but with all four of his heads. And Prabhupada is writing that Brahma, he has a head in every single direction. He has one head facing this way, one head facing that way, one head facing this way, and another head facing backwards. So Prabhupada is writing that Brahma has a different head in all the four directions. And although it would have been enough just to have his front head bowing down to Krishna, but no, Brahma, he wanted to surrender everything fully, whatever he has, onto Krishna's lotus feet without any reservations. And so Prabhupada writes that not just with one head, but with all four of his head, somehow or other Brahma got all four of his heads to bow down to Krishna and touch Krishna's lotus feet with the crowns of all of his four heads. And with his eyes, he was crying tears of ecstasy, and with the tears coming from his eyes, he was doing an abhishek for Krishna's lotus feet. And thirdly, Prabhupada writes that not only does Brahma get down, touch the ground, fall flat, offer obeisances, and not only does he touch Krishna's feet with all four of his head, but he gets back up, then he offers obeisance the second time, gets back up, offers obeisance the third time, and this way continuously, non-stop, again and again, he rises up, offers dandavats, tens and dozens and hundreds of times, again and again and again, at the same time crying tears of ecstasy. So in this way, Prabhupada is explaining that this is the mood of surrendering to Supreme Personality Godhead, that when we're surrendering, we shouldn't have any reservations, we just give ourselves fully. Whatever we have, we surrender unto Lotus Feet Krishna. And from the third point, we see that for a devotee, he never thinks that I have surrendered enough. He never thinks I have done enough devotional service. Just offering dandavats once, Brahma could have thought, okay, I've done enough. I've touched the ground, I've laid myself flat, not just one head, but I've made all four of my heads touch Krishna's lotus feet, and I'm crying tears of ecstasy. I'm worshipping Krishna with my tears. Brahma could have thought that's enough, but no. He's feeling himself so small and insignificant. Prabhupada writes that Brahma, in another instance, he was feeling like a mosquito amongst elephants. So Brahma, he's feeling himself so tiny and insignificant in front of Krishna that he doesn't feel that just offering obeisance is one. He doesn't feel offering obeisance twice or 3 times, 10 times, 20 times enough. He repeatedly gets up and down, offering obeisances again and again and again. So again, we see the mood of the devotees. They, even though they've surrendered and given everything at the lotus feet of Shri Shri Radha Gopinath, they never think they've done enough, and they always want to do more and more. They always feel themselves as so insignificant, so small, and they always see Krishna as so great, and they just want to do more and more service. So this was the mood in which Prabhupada is explaining in this very beautiful purport of how Brahma was surrendering onto Krishna's lotus feet. So the same mood we can also take and apply in our lives. One time I was reading this Leela of Prabhupada, Rameshwar Prabhu, he's explaining this, that sometime during Prabhupada's time, Rameshwar Prabhu, he was in charge of the BBT, and there was some conflict amongst the devotees. He had some difference of opinion with other senior devotees in the movement regarding the books, how it should be printed, and so on and so forth, some managerial issue. And then Rameshwar Prabhu, he writes to Prabhupada that, there's this issue, no one is agreeing with me, we're having this conflict. If this continues on, Prabhupada, I don't think I can handle it anymore, and I just want to resign. I'm going to offer my resignation letter, and I'm going to resign from the head of the BBT. I can't take this anymore. And then Prabhupada, he writes one letter back to Rameshwar Prabhu, telling him that once one has surrendered fully onto the lotus feet of Krishna, that's it. Once you're surrendered, eternally you have to be surrendered to Krishna's lotus feet. There's no question of resignations. Once surrendered means eternally you're surrendered. You can't resign. There's no question, there's no option that, okay, I've surrendered. I've done service for this many years. I've done service for this many lifetimes. Now I want to resign. Prabhupada is saying, once you surrender yourself fully to Krishna, that's it. There's no question of resignation. And Rameshwar Prabhu, he's explaining in this memory that struck him so much, and he always remembered that. And he said one time he did the mistake, but after that, he realized, he repented, and he was always remembering this, that Prabhupada said that, okay, we've all fully surrendered our life to Srila Prabhupada, to this movement, ISKCON. Now there's no question of resignation, there's no question of looking back. We just have to give ourselves fully, continue on in the service of fulfilling the desires of Prabhupada and Krishna and of the previous acharyas. Okay, so now coming to the verse of today. So we're just hearing about the creation of the universe. Okay, we're hearing about the partial destruction. So we heard that at the end of Brahma's day, we were hearing from Kamsari Prabhu yesterday that there's a partial annihilation, and at the end of Brahma's lifetime there's a mass destruction, and at that time all the living entities, they merge into the body of Mahavishnu. But at the end of Brahma's day, instead of going to Mahavishnu, they go into the body of Garbhodaksha Vishnu, and all the gross bodies, they're unmanifest, and all the living entities, they go into a subtle, along with the subtle bodies, they go into a sleeping condition into the body of Garbhodaksha Vishnu, and this includes Brahma also. He's also sleeping. Then at the start of Brahma's day, after 1,000 Divya Yugas, then everyone, the whole thing is recreated. And that's what we're hearing now in Bhagavatam, about how the lotus flower is again sprouting, and in the lotus flower, the stem of the lotus flower is all the, it's like the Virat Roop, is all the ingredients or necessities for the creation of the material cosmos. And this way, then Brahma is born. And in the next verses coming up in this section of Bhagavatam, we will hear what Brahma does or thinks when he's reborn again. His consciousness, his mood, all these different things we will see. And so this will continue on in the rest of this chapter. Okay, I'll stop here. Is there any questions, comments before we finish? Okay. Gantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Joguru Srila Prabhupada ki jai, entire Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. This girl in this